All right, so I want to take a closer look at school desegregation. One of the topics that we looked at when we were looking at this modern civil rights movement stuff. It comes from a court case called Brown versus Board of Education. Make sure you have that down somewhere. It's going to be on the test. Brown versus Board of Education happened in 1954. The fellow you're going to see in the middle of that picture is a man named Thurgood Marshall. Thurgood Marshall was the head of the legal arm of the NAACP during this time. So he's the lead lawyer that's going to help to get this case um, through and end segregation in public schools. Now, that flies in the face of the 1898 decision or 1896 decision, Plessy versus Ferguson, which, if you'll recall, had established a segregated society. I had told um, told the country it was okay to have separate facilities as long as they were equal. The problem is they weren't very equal. Uh, and so the Supreme Court in 1954 will say, well, you can't have separate schools for black and white students. The problem is it's easy for the Supreme Court to say that. It's a lot harder to change the minds of people in these places where they'd had segregated schools to accept the fact that the races were going to be mixing. I want to show you two examples, two famous examples of this happening. Again, I've got a couple of great videos I'm going to post uh, right after this set of notes, and be sure you're taking a look. I got a really cool interview with Ruby Bridges, especially, who is this little guy we're going to talk about next. Ruby Bridges is going to desegregate an elementary school in uh, New Orleans, Louisiana. She's first grader, and imagine, I remember kind of the first days of sending Noah to school and just how nervous you are just to send your kid kind of out into the world for the first time to begin with. But imagine being a parent having to send your child into a situation where there are threats of violence against them, where you know they're going to deal with kind of horrible circumstances. But she had taken an aptitude test. It's kind of the same thing we saw with Jackie Robinson. These first students, the Little Rock Nine and Ruby Bridges, are given aptitude tests. They want to make sure that they're going to be successful in these desegregated schools, because you don't want a whole bunch of people to come in, not perform academically, and then kind of set the cause back. So Ruby Bridges had tested with several other elementary age children. She's the only one that ends up going to a desegregated school. She is put in a classroom with white students, but she's not allowed to go to recess. She's not allowed to go to lunch, pretty much any of those kind of unsupervised times or times where supervision is a little more lax. I know what some of you are saying. Recess and lunch are your favorite things about school, so imagine not being able to do that. But she's one of the people that is going to desegregate schools. The others is this group of kids. These are high schoolers. It's going to be folks that you relate to probably a little more directly. They're known in history as the Little Rock Nine. Now, I know you're looking at this picture and there are 10 people. So since Logan's not there to raise his hand and tell me there are 10 people in the picture, I will tell you that one of the ladies that is standing there in the back, the lady second from the left in the back row, is their kind of NAACP liaison. So she was an adult who was in charge of helping them. The Little Rock Nine are going to be chosen 9 excellent students to desegregate the high school in Little Rock. Got a video I want you to watch of the Little Rock Nine. I want you to take a look at this high school. It is incredible to look at. Amanda, Noah, and I traveled to Little Rock several years ago for a wedding. Of course, I like to learn things when I go on vacation, so we went by Little Rock High School, and it is still very impressive today. Just a really kind of gorgeous. Looks like it belongs on a college campus. But it had been built very recently, and so there are going to be major protests, though, These kids had originally planned on starting school just like everybody else. They're told they're going to wait a couple of weeks to get things settled down. Eventually, they're brought to school in jeeps by soldiers. President Eisenhower has to send in the National Guard to protect these kids. Soldiers will follow them to class, walk with them in the hallways to keep them safe, just because of the threats against their lives, the community, kind of their negative response to what is happening. I got to see one of these guys speak several years ago at Hanover College. They did a series where they brought one of these Ernest Green in for in celebration of Martin Luther King's birthday. Just incredible. The guy, I think, had 2 doctorate degrees and was brilliant, but talked about those experiences in Little Rock. These are the folks that are going to pave the way for school desegregation to happen. One of the problems with school desegregation is usually you go to school where you live. And because of that, even if you had desegregated schools in a lot of these big cities, you would have schools in white neighborhoods that were white. You'd have schools in black neighborhoods that were black. Louisville struggled with that problem, and one of the things they had to do is they had to start busing kids in the 1970s. So 5, 6 years before I was born, is the first time you saw desegregation in schools. So almost 20 years after the Brown versus Board of Education, Louisville schools were desegregated. So imagine how much worse it was farther down south. But there's a famous picture in the Courier Journal of a young white student and a young black student shaking hands on the first day of school. I'll try and get that and link that for you on the Canvas page. The other thing that's, but interestingly enough, maybe 5, 6 years ago now, in 2020, as I record this, there was a Supreme Court decision that said that Louisville couldn't use busing to do that. Now there were some kids that brought a lawsuit because they couldn't go to the school that was very close to their home. They were being bused to another place. The Supreme Court said, no, you got to go back. You got to find another way to do that. And so now in a lot of big cities, they do what are called magnet schools. And so they'll have schools for children with particular interest. And so trying to draw and get racial diversity that way. But these kids that you see are some of the first kind of pioneers of this. Great book that I read about this one. And it is the story of 2 ladies that you see in this picture. Elizabeth Eckford is the young black woman that you see walking there. She was one of the Little Rock Nine, and she didn't have a telephone. And so the night before they were going to school, when they called around and told the kids, "Hey, we're coming to get you. We'll take you to school in the Jeep," she didn't get the message. So she actually took public transportation down to the school, and so she meets kind of this whole group of people just violently protesting outside of where she was at. She ends up walking from one bus stop to another. There's a statue of her that's there, and then can't get through. She ends up going home. The lady behind her is a lady named Hazel Bryant. There's a great book called Elizabeth and Hazel I've got on my shelves. There may be something to see if you can Amazon. I'm going to put the author of the book. He's reading the introductory chapter. I'm going to put that on the playlist. And it talks about these 2 women and how they are entwined in history. This image of very stoic Elizabeth, and then Hazel, who's right behind her, the young lady who's screaming at her. That becomes kind of this face of racism in the South. But it's all around this idea of school desegregation. Now, Ruby Bridges and the Little Rock Nine may be evidence if you're going for the school route with your To Kill a Mockingbird paper. So would encourage you to dig a little bit more into that if you need to.